Tim Kawakami, who you said you heard TK say something a couple of weeks ago that hinted that he might have had an early line on Deebo Samuel discontent. But part of what he wrote in The Athletic after John Lynch's press conference on Monday is I think Deebo is closer now to getting his trade wish than he was last week, largely because of the raw discomfort that he's causing. And we've talked about this in the sense that if he really wants to get traded, he's got to go all the way. And he's got to make it really uncomfortable. He has to convince the 49ers that trying to keep him is more painful than trading him, which is hard because trading him would be very painful.
Well, he made his general manager really uncomfortable. You could see it. I mean, it's what didn't take a John Lynch body language expert to figure out that he was not. He really had to be careful what he said, but he did not like the situation at all. And deep down, if you've watched John long enough, he was fucking pissed off. But he understands 2022, he had to fake it. Well, I would say this. John Lynch is actually much more easygoing and happy than his younger counter and coworker and technical boss, Kyle Shanahan. Maybe Kyle avoided this because John really struggles at lying. And yesterday he basically didn't. He just told everyone, I can't talk about this. So please do not ask me. And then he fidgeted around. And it almost felt like they were breaking him down because he would like say a little, but then he'd be like, no, we can't. I got to stop. Well, what do you think the skinny guy with a beard, whose last name is Shanahan, thinks? Because if that was John uncomfortable, what do you think, old Kyle? You think he's happy?
I think he'd probably have a harder time hiding his emotions. Yes.
You think he might have thrown a soda bottle at like Biederman or something? I wonder if the discomfort that John showed, Kyle's anger behind the scenes could be pretty high. That, are you fucking serious? That I have to deal with. Now, you're lucky that when a player demands a trade, he has a lot of value. So you're asking teams for 10 and 35 and next year's 2, or you're asking for a boatload, right? Like ultimately when you decided or you realize like Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, like the best thing those teams had going for them is their value was massive, right? Even Jamal Adams, Jalen Ramsey, like you do get a lot back. Like ideally you don't want to trade good players, but when you do, like you trade shitty players, like the Detroit Lions traded Laken Tomlinson for a 7th round pick. And then the guy became a star guard for the Niners. Like that's not good business. At least Deebo, if you are going to be forced into this, which I don't think the Niners will get forced into this, but I could see, I don't know how to describe their stubborn, their anger combined with the situation of avoiding just we just want to focus on Trey and getting back to the playoffs. And I can't beg Deebo Samuel to either take the offer, pretend to like Santa Clara. Like, I don't know what to say to him. I've exhausted all my options. That it is an easy transition if you feel, we all understand that it's impossible to get value, right? Because you're trading an elite player who's in the league. I don't care if they ultimately hit the picks. There's going to be some luck involved, right? The Jets or the Texans or whoever would get Deebo would immediately win because they have Deebo Samuel. Now, if you end up hitting on whoever you draft with a couple picks, it's incredible because those guys immediately resort back to Deebo's pay scale. And if they're good, you're in great shape, right? But that's a complete unknown, which I think also causes a lot of stress, right? Like I don't want to have to draft Deebo's replacement because, yeah, I could love whoever. Like it took Brandon Ayuk a little time. Like, so I could love Garrett Wilson and we know we could end up getting him at 10. But what if it turns out I was a little wrong? Jimmy Johnson was wrong. Bill Parcells has been wrong. Andy Reid, like I wouldn't be the first or be the last. So I can imagine the stress, which then the stress turns into anger because I shouldn't be stressed over this, right?
Yeah. 80% of Deebo Samuel might not be enough for you to go back to the NFC Championship game. You might need 100% of Deebo Samuel, right? That's what it took last year, was 100%. Was this guy's absolute best to get you to the NFC Championship game. So that's part of it, is can you take 3/4 of the production and backfill it somewhere else and then use that money elsewhere? Well, at this point, this year at least, you're not really using that money elsewhere, really.
There's no one else to get.
There's nothing else to do. And I do think it's probably hard to unemotionally take a step back and realize if we wait this thing out, my opinion, this is me talking, I think it's pretty likely that he has to show up based on, of his $6 million that he's made, $4 million of it came in year one. So that means that he's made $1 million give or take. I think year 2 was actually $800,000 or $900,000, and then year 3 was a little higher. But because of the way the rookie contract is structured, that bonus, $4 million of it is right away.
Yeah.
So that means that he's made gross $1 million each of the last 2 years, which we figure, I don't know how much of it's end up in his pocket, half that. So if you're the Niners, you recognize
even that $4 million the moment you sign that signing bonus in California.
Sure.
You know, was he see 2.1?
So to me, there is the real scenario where you start going to OTAs, and now we're getting closer to the season, and it's a lot harder for him to not show up. But do you want to play that game with a guy that doesn't want to be there? Do you want to force one of your most important players to show up if he doesn't want to be there? What are you really getting? And his tact is a smart one. Anybody that has siblings like you do or I do know that there is a way to play the game where you poke and poke and poke and poke and poke and poke and poke, and eventually you can get them to snap. Especially we're both older siblings. I know for me, you can just poke and poke and poke, and you can get away with it. And mom isn't paying attention. You're not making noise, and you just know how to bug them and 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 bug them until they snap and they do something dumb, right? And it's your sibling that gets in trouble because they're screaming and yelling in the grocery store. They're throwing something at you. It's just it's in your nature, and it's it wouldn't be what I would want to do if I were in Deebo's seat necessarily, but there is a way sometimes to get somebody to give up their leverage, and that is to make it miserable for them to play the game. And I'm with you. I think it's probably miserable right now for Kyle Shanahan to have to even think about this. He's trying to get Trey Lance ready for the season.
Well, remember, this was self-inflicted last year, but they had somewhat of a zoo with the Trey, this is not Philly. This is not New York. This is not, Boston. But for 49er standards, like last year was pretty intense. The Trey Lance Jimmy thing. Again, they created that. I think you can live with, they created that for the right reasons. We had to try to upgrade our quarterback, but he wasn't quite ready. We stuck with Jimmy. And remember, it was not an easy start. Pretty sure they were 3-5. Now, I don't think it was just because of that, but there was just a lot going on. I think you want to avoid, and Belichick is king of this, right? Anything that's out of our control. Like, we can't have it. I watched, like most people, follow Deebo on Instagram. I love his energy. I like his vibe. And I think the Niners love his vibe.
He doesn't seem angry when you look at photos or videos of him right now.
No,
right?
He's a positive multiplier, and which is very, very important. I think you can avoid it in a lot of businesses, right? It's like just you sell, I sell. I think it's very, very difficult in pro sports. When you're just a team, you're around each other all the time. I would imagine as a football team, probably you're just around each other more than 99% of industries. Think how much time you're just sitting with each other, especially like the offensive guys with the offensive guys, the defensive guys with the defensive guys. You're just for 6 straight months, basically every day. I mean, just nonstop. It's hard to hide good guys and bad guys. It's why ultimately, once the draft's right around the corner, you try to avoid shitheads and bad guys. And it's a hard balance. Sometimes you take chances on guys, but then you realize right away, you're like, I just don't want this guy's energy around. Jim Washburn once said, it's always easy for you guys up here in the front office to be like, this guy can play, but he's a questionable personality. And then I got to handle him. Once football starts and you guys just get on the next crew of guys.
That's why we pay you, coach.
It's why you make all the money and, we're not making as much, but he was right. And Deebo doesn't fall into that category at all, but we've all been in situations, well, maybe not all of us if you're listening to this, but you and I have been in situations where you're not happy with your work situation for whatever reason. I've actually been there twice. I was like that in Philly. I can relate in the sense I would remember being really homesick. We were losing. It's like this profession, I don't know if I see myself doing this for a decade. I didn't, beside a couple guys that I worked with, I don't have friends in Philly. This place is freezing fucking cold. We're going to win 6 games. This sucks. I don't make any money. What am I doing with my life? I want to get home. And so I've defended Deebo if that is truly his reason. I listened to a little Jeff Darlington on with Rich Eisen. It just came up on our YouTube homepage. So I clicked on it. And he basically alluded to with I don't want to speak for him, but he knows he doesn't want to be here. I think a lot of this is location based, and I can relate to being homesick's the wrong, like, you don't want, I'm old. I don't want to move back in with my parents. It's just being a familiar place. I don't, now it's a lot different. People, they're willing to pay him, we think, a lot of money. But I don't know if this is something, and like what Tim's alluding to, like Deebo's just going to pivot.
He might not. And the other part of this, Jets Gang on the stream says, players get paid for endorsements, investing. You don't know how much money Deebo has. Yeah, Deebo might have invested in Tesla with all the money he got in 2019, for all I know. I don't know what he has. But I go back to Devontae a lot. Devontae Adams had $60 million that he'd made. So he had more leverage when it came to telling the Packers what he would and wouldn't do than a player who is, 3 months away from conservatively $50 million, I would say. I don't think Deebo's getting less than $50 million in his next contract. Okay.
And a signing bonus, probably $25 to $30 million or something, right?
And it's coming. It's coming this year. Like Deebo Samuel is going to get $50 million in the next 3 months from somebody.
But he's literally going to get a direct deposit potentially of $30 million
from somebody, from the Niners, from the Dolphins, from the Jets, from the Texans, I don't know, from someone.
Maybe a sleeper team.
It is coming, John.
You don't think there's any chance he plays next season without a brand new contract?
Well, I think if he plays I shouldn't say no chance, right? Maybe he wants to not be a Niner bad enough that he realizes my leverage is I got to play this year. I got to wait it one more year. And then when it comes to the franchise tag, they'll trade me. They'll trade me in one more year.
Which I think would be very, very risky if that scenario plays out, because it's like, well, they would try to ride him still. And then does he give it his all? Is he all there? Not even just on game day, but just during, I could see this is where I think they're stressed. They can't hide it, and why Kyle couldn't show. Because that's what they are already thinking of. Like, they're already thinking of the locker room, his mindset. What do we do? This is a major problem, until Deebo either says, I'm all in, or they decide to trade him. And if they decide to trade him, different than DeForest, that was purely a 49er decision. I won't blame them as much. I will acknowledge that they came to the decision even if it is potentially fixable, it's not a guarantee, and we can't risk that. And I understand that. Like, Deebo would not have been the first, and he won't be the last, to be involved in a situation of just the unknown is kind of scary, and then you factor in the money, and who knows when he's going to sign, or if he's even willing to take our cash, even if we're willing to pay him. Then fuck it, let's just. You have this golden opportunity in the draft if you get handed pick 10 and pick 35 or something.
Part of it is what do you get out of it?